Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our training on the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. And we're also going to cover the exclusive right to lease listing agreement. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions throughout our presentations, please feel free to ask your questions. This is an interactive class between us elite agents. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover. We will cover both listing agreements on the sales side and on the lease side. And we're also going to show you how to fill them out and begin a transaction there inside of Form Simplicity. All right. So, of course, we are going to log into Form Simplicity, and you guys can find that inside of your resource panel right here by clicking on Form Simplicity. This is the document service or the transaction service we use through the Florida Realtors. Once inside Form Simplicity, we want to go and we want to cover or click on the blank forms. Blank forms is where you'll find all of the forms. You see here, Florida, you have all of the forms in alphabetical order. Now at Elite, we have already packaged the forms for you. So if you are in a situation where you represent a seller and you're getting ready to prepare a listing agreement, you may want to go to Forms Packages. And inside of Forms Packages, you will see the different packages like the buyer package, a commercial package, and an exclusive right to sell package. This is where you're going to find the listing agreement when you are listing a property for sale. If you are listing a property for lease, then it'll be the exclusive right to lease agreement. Of course, if you are working with a renter, a tenant, you will be choosing the lease agreement, or sorry, the lease package you see here. So when you open the exclusive right to sell, you're going to see different forms in here, right? You're going to see the exclusive right of sale listing agreement transaction broker. That's the one that we're going to use and we're going to cover today. You are also going to see the modification to a listing agreement. That's the form that we will use that once we are under the listing contract and we need to make changes, perhaps we need to extend the listing agreement or change the price, we will use the modification to the listing agreement. There's also a short sale addendum to a listing agreement. There's a commission agreement, a referral agreement, and a compensation disclosure statement. These forms are rarely used. See, in a commission agreement, the commission is already agreed upon inside of the listing agreement. A commission agreement is used when you are going to represent the seller in a sale of a property. However, you're not going to list it, right? You're not going to put it on the MLS. You're not going to list it. It's a quick sale and the seller's going to pay you a commission. Then you may want to use a commission agreement. All right. These are the forms and documents that are inside of the listing package. There is another form that's not in here, which is the seller's disclosure. You're going to need a seller's disclosure when representing a seller. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into one of these forms. I'm going to go to the forms library and I want to show you a blank form, right? I want to show you a blank form and then I'll show you once you choose a package, how the form shows up inside the package. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the upper right corner and we're just going to type in listing and let's go ahead and review the exclusive right of sale listing agreement transaction broker. So it's this one here, exclusive right of sale listing agreement transaction broker. Let's open it up. All right, so the last revision on this form was done in July 30th of 2024. You'll see the revision always down here. All right, so revised in July of 2024. This is the most up-to-date listing agreement found inside of Florida Realtors. All right, so the first line is always going to be the second line actually is going to be where you're going to place the seller's name. And then the brokerage name, which is Elite Ocean View Realty, will be in the third line. All right, right here, number one, paragraph number one is where you're going to put in the amount of time that you plan to list the property. So if your agreement is for 6 months, then you want to put a 6-month range here. If your agreement is to terminate in 1 year, then once again, you're going to put a range here of 1 year. All right, line number two or paragraph number two is going to be description of the property. Of course, the street address, the legal description, and any personal property, including appliances that are going to be included in the sale of the property. All right, so all that is going to be filled out there. All right, so for paragraph number 2, letter C, is occupancy. If the property is currently occupied by a tenant, then you're going to write here, or you're going to type in is occupied by a tenant. And then if it is occupied on the right, you're going to write the date that the lease, the current lease that the tenant has, that expires. So let's say the property is listed right for sale, but it is currently occupied by a tenant and the lease expires on June 1st. Then you would be writing June 1st here. You need to let everyone on the MLS know when you are listing the property that the property is currently leased out, right? It has tenants, and the tenants move out June 1st, or the lease expires on June 1st. All right, so moving on here to number 3, which is price and terms. Of course, here you're going to place the list price. So after you've done your comparative market analysis and all of your studies, and you talk to your seller, you determine what the list price will be. You're going to place it right here. And for B is financing terms. Any financing terms that are accepted by the seller, you're going to check it. Of course, you're always going to check cash. You're going to check conventional. If the property is of FHA, accepting FHA, then you want to go ahead and select FHA. All right, so that is financing terms. There's other terms like seller financing, which you can check here, or assumption of an existing mortgage. Of course, seller financing means the seller is going to finance a dollar amount at their discretion, right, with their own interest rates. And then the assumption of an existing mortgage is if the seller is going to pass the title over to the new buyer, and they're going to allow them to just assume their existing mortgage. All right, so broker obligations. This is number 4. Broker obligations. Broker agrees to make diligent and continue efforts to sell the property in accordance with this agreement until a sales contract is pending on the property. This includes, except when not in seller's best interest, cooperating and communicating with other brokers and making the property available for showings. All right, so as the listing broker, we promise to our clients, right, our sellers, that we are going to cooperate with other brokers. We're going to show the property whenever available to other brokers that may want to bring in buyers. All right, that's number 4. Number 5 is the multiple listing service, of course, the MLS. We need to let our sellers know we are going to place the property inside of the MLS. And this is pretty much an explanation that placing the property in the MLS is a beneficial factor to the seller. Of course, we're going to expose the property to a very large number of people who have buyers. In some instances, right, a buyer may want to exclude the property from the MLS, meaning that the property, the seller does not want to advertise their property on the MLS. And there's going to be a section down below where they can remove their property from the MLS, which is over here. And under broker authority B, it says not publicly market to the public, seller opt out. So seller does not authorize broker to display the property on the MLS. They would have to check here, and then they would have to initial down here. With the, of course, understanding that now the property will not appear on the MLS, therefore limiting the exposure of the property to other agents. All right. Does anyone have input on why this would happen? Why would a seller not want the property to show on the MLS? Anyone? All right.
No.
Well, Claudio, you were gonna say something or no?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. No, why?
Oh, okay. All right. So let's say the seller is an exclusive, VIP client, or just a very private client, and they do not want a lot of people visiting their home. They might want to exclude that property from the MLS. Or if simply you are going to sell the property yourself, like you already talked to the seller and say, hey, look, seller, let me have the listing agreement. I have 10 buyers that are lined up, ready to buy the home. So there's no need to place it on the MLS. And that's another reason why that would happen. Otherwise, you are required to upload the property in the MLS within 48 hours of having this listing agreement signed.
So this would be considered an off-market property then?
Yeah, it could be considered an off-market property, because it's
Okay,
not going to be sold on the MLS. It's not going to show as a sale on the MLS, so it'll show as an off-market property. But you are the exclusive agent to that seller.
okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so number six, broker authority, again, talks about public marketing, includes, but it's not limited to flyers, yard signs, digital marketing on public facing websites, brokerage websites, displays, IDX. IDX, guys, is when your websites, like for example, on my website, I'm gonna go ahead and show you real quick here. On my website and on most of your websites, you guys have listings that are not yours, right? None of these listings are mine. This is IDX. Because of an IDX, your listing is going to show up on everyone's website. Everyone's website. Anyone who has a website, your listing will show up. So when talking about IDX, you agree to have your listing show up on people's websites, on realtor.com, on Zillow, on just many, many different websites worldwide. All right. So again, increasing the exposure of the property. All right. The seller does have the option to opt out from that too, right? Where they do not want their property to show up on Zillow or Realtor.com or public websites. All right. And you would be opting out over here. All right. So not publicly marketed on public seller, opt out. All right. All right, so just go through this, guys, and make sure that you know what you're explaining to the seller. Sometimes sellers would want to read the listing agreement. In most cases, the seller knows or has confidence in you that you know what you're saying and you know that you are doing, and they're not going to question too much on the listing agreement. But just be prepared. Just take some time. The listing agreement isn't that long, and get to know the listing agreement the way we're doing today. Okay. Seller obligations. This is important. All right. The seller needs to agree to all of this. In consideration of broker's obligations, seller agrees to cooperate with the broker, meaning that when we request to show the property needs to be available, right? The seller cannot give you a hard time. Oh, I'm not going to be home. We can't place it on lockbox, and I have a very limited time during the week when I can show the property. That's not cooperation, right? I mean, your listing is going to have a hard time selling when you're not showing the property, right? So cooperating with the broker is definitely one of the seller's obligations. All right. Recognize that the broker may be subject to an additional MLS obligation and potential penalties for failure to comply with them. All right. So definitely, if you're not showing the property, you can get in trouble with the MLS. Provide brokers with keys to the property and make the property available for broker to show during reasonable times. Of course, reasonable times. I once had a client say that, I can only see properties after 8 p.m. on weekdays. That's not reasonable. All right. That's not going to happen. And even if the property's on a super lockbox, chances are they're going to deny your showing request simply because it's past 8 p.m. I mean, what are you doing out there? It happens. So reasonable times. Inform broker before leasing, mortgaging, or otherwise encumbering the property. So once again, it is their responsibility to let you know, hey, look, I just refinanced my property, right? Or I am getting ready to rent my property out. Hopefully they use you, right? If you're already their listing agent, hopefully they use you to lease the property out. All right, so that's this letter E, sorry, little D right here. All right, so let's move on here to number 8, which is the one of the most important part of the listing agreement is the compensation. You guys all know that the sellers are not obligated to compensate a buyer brokerage. However, as a listing agent, you are going to ask for your compensation, right? We don't work for free. So number 8, compensation, letter A, you are going to place the amounts of compensation that you, as the listing agent, is going to make. So if you agree that you're going to make 3% on this listing agreement or this listing transaction, you're going to write 3% of the purchase price plus $495, which is our Elite Ocean View Realty transaction fee. All right, so 3% of the purchase price plus $495, which is the Elite Ocean View transaction fee. Always fill out number A, right? Or letter A, sorry. You're not going to do letter B and you're not going to do letter C, right? We're going to go ahead and fill out letter A. Now, 3% goes to the listing agent. Drop down to number 10. If the seller agrees to compensate the buyer broker, right, then you have three options here. Letter A, seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to the buyer's broker in the amount of a percentage of the purchase price. So you check letter A or letter B. Seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker from seller in the amount of percentage of the purchase price. Letter C is no compensation will be offered to the buyer's broker. So when we're talking compensations and when you are representing a buyer, especially with Elite Ocean View Realty, we always recommend that you ask for compensation directly from the seller, right? We don't want to involve the listing brokerage. So letter A is that you're requesting compensation from the listing brokerage, all right? Letter B is that you are going to be requesting compensation from the seller. So right here, the seller agrees, right? Seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker from the seller. So that's going to come out of their total, closing costs at the end of the closing. So if they agree to also pay a buyer broker 3%, then you're going to write 3%. That is a total now of 6%. Some of you in this training were not around prior to August 17th of 2024, when on the listing agreement, there was a section where you say the total compensation that is to be collected and then how it would be broken down. That has been eliminated, right? If you look at section 8, letter F, brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. That means number 8, letter A, we're going to negotiate our compensation as the listing brokerage, and then we're going to ask the seller, are they willing to contribute towards the buyer broker? If they say yes, then how much? Then you write it here. If the seller says, listen, Robert, the total amount of compensation I want to pay in this transaction is 4%, then you should be fair and you should break it by, divide it in two. You should say 2 goes to the buyer, right? And 2 goes to the seller. If you go ahead and you say 3 and then 1 to the buyer, that's sending mixed messages to the seller. Hey, how come you're going to make more than the buyer agent? You can simply explain to the seller that the buyer agent is also going to have an agreement with their buyer, where the buyer is going to cover the difference, if there is a difference, on the compensation due to them. So, there are many ways for us to talk to our sellers. Sellers are usually going to want to pay anywhere between 4 and 5% nowadays. We don't really see many 6% out there. So if you have been representing buyers and you've been calling and they've been telling you, hey, 2.5% is being offered or 2%, it's simply because that listing was probably secured at a 4% compensation or 5% compensation. Any questions on compensation letter number 8 and number 10? Did you guys got it? All right.
Robert, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
So I got the part about the compensation from the seller. What if the the buyer's broker, the buyer's broker, no, the buyer,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Is securing some compensation from the buyer, say 3%.
So in this case, they're gonna make 2% from the seller and 1% from the buyer. So if the
Right.
buyer broker has an exclusive buyer broker agreement with their buyer for 3%, and we are offering them 2, then
Mhm.
the buyer will have to pay 1% to their agent at closing. Remember, the buyer broker agreement, whatever you write there as a compensation is the total amount you are going to make as a buyer agent. So whether the total amount comes from the seller or a portion of the amount comes from the seller, all right, at closing, the buyer's either going to pay nothing or they're going to pay the difference. Does that
Okay,
make sense? And we are going to have a class on the buyer broker agreement at some point in the next couple of months. But I want you guys to know that on the buyer broker agreement, there is a section where, as a buyer agent, you are going to write what compensation you're going to make as part of their representation. And if they decide they're going to write 3%, and now they're trying to sell my listing and we're offering only 2, then the buyer needs to pay the agent 1% at closing. If I was offering, right, if the seller was offering 3%, then the buyer doesn't have to pay anything. Does that make sense?
it makes sense, but what if the seller's broker doesn't know that? Will the seller's broker always know what the buyer broker is offering? No.
No, no.
Right.
So
So what I'm thinking,
the buyer broker will have a conversation with you and they will ask you, Donna, is the seller compensating buyer brokers? And you, as the listing representative, will tell them yes, they're compensating 2%. So now the buyer agent knows that the buyer's going to need to put up 1% at the closing.
I understand. Thank you.
Yep. All right, guys. So the rest of the listing agreement is pretty standard dispute resolution. You're gonna have to get the seller's initials here and then your initials as well. All right, so it's basically explaining to them what happens if this property goes into arbitration. All right, and what happens then. So you're gonna see here an explanation on that. Any miscellaneous here will be there as well. And then the additional terms, any additional terms to the listing agreement will be written under 15. Remember, additional terms are anything that's not covered in this agreement. If you found something that you want to make part of this transaction and it's not covered in the listing agreement, you have an opportunity to write it in here. Of course, that's going to need to be agreed upon by the seller. Okay. And then the last page is for the seller signatures, and you are the broker authorized sales associate. So you do not need initials or signatures from our broker. All right. You can go ahead and sign the listing agreement, and you're also going to initial everywhere where it says broker authorized associate, you will also initial it. So you are the authorized associate representative of this listing. There's no need for our broker to sign this. Okay. All right, guys, that's the listing agreement. Of course, I am going to show you how to fill it out. I'm going to go ahead and close this out without saving. And I do want to go ahead and cover real quick here the modification to the listing agreement. So I'm going to go ahead and search for it. I'm just going to type in modification here. And we're going to show you the modification to the listing agreement real quick. All right, so we have over here the modification to the listing agreement, which is the last one on the list here. We're gonna go ahead and click on it. So if you are already in a listing agreement and you need to make changes, okay, so the owner's name goes up here, Elite Ocean View Realty, the brokerage name goes down here, and then check one. All right, what are we doing? So is this, first of all, is this an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, or is this an exclusive right to lease listing agreement? So you got to check one of these. And then the termination date, the new termination date will be. So doesn't say new, but the termination date will be. So if you need to extend the listing, then you're gonna check here and you're gonna put in the new termination date. If there is a price change, the price change in terms will be. So once again, the price will be. Is there any change in compensation? Right? If they are gonna cancel the listing, right? Cancellation fee to broker will be. So this is the modification to the listing agreement. You're going to need one of these if you're going to cancel a listing, if you're going to extend the listing, or if you're going to change the price. The broker, all right, or authorized sales associate, again, will sign this and initial it as well. All right. Now, when you are going to cancel a listing because they requested for you to cancel the listing, you are going to need to consult with our broker, right? We're going to try and save this for you. So you are going to need to have a conversation with Tio and let him know that your client wishes to cancel the listing, and we're going to try and figure if there's anything that we can do to rescue this transaction. All right. So let's go ahead and close this out without saving. And let me bring up here the seller's disclosure, which is something that we will need when you are representing a seller. So I'm going to go ahead and put in here seller, and we're going to look for it. And it's this one here, seller's property disclosure residential and seller's property disclosure condominium. So if it's a house, you're going to select residential. If it's a condo, you select condo. Let's open it up. Now, the seller's disclosure is like a questionnaire. You as the agent, you are not going to fill this out. You're basically going to send it over to the seller so they can go ahead and answer the questions as truthfully as possible. Buyers, when they are entering into a contract to purchase your listing, they are going to request a seller's disclosure. It is a required form. So we need to have this form ready. So it's a bunch of questions, yes, no, and don't know. The seller's going to go down this list and they're going to look at all the questions and answer each question as truthfully as possible. The sellers will need to initial every single page, just like the buyer will need to initial the page when we produce this form to the buyer. All right. This is the seller's property disclosure. I've noticed that it's not inside of the listing package. I'm going to have Teal add it to our listing package because this should be part of our listing package. All right. Seller's property disclosure. Notice in red, this form must be filled out by the seller, therefore cannot be completed by an agent or broker on Form Simplicity. All right. So you do not have the option to type here or select anything. Can you type here? Yes, you can type here. You can prepare this by putting in the property address, but that's it. All right. The rest needs to be given over to the seller. All right, let's close that out. That's the seller's property disclosure. It's a questionnaire, guys. All right, and then if the property was built in 1978 or prior to 1978, guys, you also want to make sure that you provide a lead lead info pamphlet right here. All right, so a lead info pamphlet. When someone places an offer on your property, they're usually going to send you a lead-based paint disclosure, right? And this lead-based paint disclosure is going to have here a section where the sellers need to choose whether they know that there is a presence of lead base or that they don't know. Usually you're going to get a seller's initials to be like this. Seller has no knowledge of lead base paint, right? And seller has no reports or records pertaining to lead base paint. So basically they're pretty much denying knowing anything of lead base, and they're going to have initials here and initials here. Okay. And then the buyers are going to have to acknowledge receipt And then you as the agent, you're going to have to acknowledge receipt. All right, those of you that are familiar with lease agreements, this page is one of the pages inside of a lease agreement. All right, but when purchasing, you have to add this page. You have to add this page individually or separately. All right, but we're not going to worry about this now, guys. We are going to only worry about the listing agreement. Now, I'm going to cover real quick before we actually show you how to fill out one of these forms. I'm going to cover the listing agreement for lease. So once again, we're going to remain inside of the forms packages, and we're going to go ahead and type in here the word lease, right? We're going to open here, and we are going to look for the exclusive right to lease listing agreement. By the way, guys, there is a difference between a regular lease agreement for residential properties and a lease agreement for a commercial property. Notice right up here, there is the exclusive right to lease commercial, right? And this is residential. When you are listing a property that is commercial for sale, there's also an exclusive right to sell listing agreement for a commercial property. All right, but this is the lease one right here for commercial, and this is the lease for residential. Let's open it up. And it's pretty standard. It pretty much looks identical to the listing agreement that's going to be for sale. However, it is important for us to know how to fill out number 3. Number 3 is the rental rate and terms. All right, this is a bit confusing. You guys may think that just because you're going to rent a property for $3,000 a month, you're going to check monthly. When you check monthly, you're letting you're saying that you are going to accept month-to-month leases, right? So that's not really how it is. We're going to go ahead and do a yearly lease, right? We want to lease a property and we want to have it available for yearly leases. And then right here, you don't write 3,000 times 12, right? You just write 3,000, all right? You got month to month, and then you have weekly. So yearly, 3,000. And then you also have seasonally right here as well, okay? If there's any advanced rents, deposits, and fees, you want to say, all right, so advanced rents and deposits will be held by owner. All right, we're not going to hold it. Broker in Florida, we're not going to hold it. And then is it going to be in a non-interest bearing account? Should be in a non-interest bearing account. So if you are, as the broker, if you're going to hold the escrow, any balance of interest will accrue, and it's going to be payable to who? All right, it tells you there. All right. Broker obligations, once again, it's similar to the obligations you will have as a listing agent for a sale. And owner obligations, once again, it's just going to let them know, hey, they're obligated to, make the property available for showings and other things. And then number 6 is compensation. You are going to make how much in compensation? So this again is amount of compensation or owner agrees to pay broker. Who's the broker? We are. So if we're going to go with a total of 10% compensation, then you're going to go 5% here, right? And then number 7, right? So number 7 here, cooperation and compensation with brokers. Broker's office policy is to cooperate with other brokers except when not in the owner's best interest, and to offer compensation in the amount of 5%. So a total of 10% from the landlord is going to be paid for this listing, and it's going to be divided by 2 or in half. 5% to the listing agent, 5% to whoever brings in a tenant. If you decide you want to go with half month, right? So instead of a percentage, you're going to go here, 100% right here. Sorry, not 100, 50%, 50% of the first month's rent. And then once again, down here, it's going to be 50% of the first month's rent. All right, so you're explaining now to the agent, or sorry, to the landlord, that it's gonna cost them pretty much 1 month, right? 50% due to you and 50% due to the cooperating broker. Now, guys, keep in mind on the MLS, we no longer have access to how much compensation is being paid. So in every single case, the agent is going to ask you, is the seller or landlord paying compensation? And then, of course, you have the opportunity to let them know either via a phone conversation, a text message, or email. All right. I don't know about you, but I've been receiving every time I show a property, I've been receiving different text messages or emails from agents say, hey, I just want you to know that our seller is compensating 2.5%, or our seller's compensating 3%. Totally legal. That's legal to do. All right. The only thing that's not legal to do is to have a compensation on the MLS. That is no longer allowed. All right, guys. So this is the listing agreement for a lease. It's very similar, just with a few changes. Any questions on the listing agreement for lease? Right. Doesn't seem like we have any questions. So now let's actually put this into practice. All right. So when you guys are getting ready to list a property and you go to Form Simplicity, right, we're going to go ahead and create a transaction. Now, whenever you are trying to create a transaction for a property that's on the MLS, of course, we know that we go here and we click on Form Simplicity. But a listing itself is not on the MLS, right? You're preparing a listing agreement. So you're going to go directly to Form Simplicity and you're going to click on Start a New Transaction. Right? We're going to go ahead and put in the address of the property here. So you put the address of the property, and then you're going to name the transaction the same as the address. Property type is going to be what? Residential, commercial, you name it. And then the transaction time is the transaction type is listing. Right away, we're going to give you the opportunity to check one of the packages. So let's go ahead and go with the exclusive right to sell package. And then we're going to go ahead and click on create a transaction. And a new transaction is now active on inside of Form Simplicity for the property address. Before we go forward, we want to now use public record to import property data. So look here for import property data. We're going to click here, and you cannot import from the MLS because the property does not exist in the MLS, right? You are creating a listing here. So we're going to import from tax search, right? We're going to import from tax search the house number. So let's go ahead and put in the house number and the street name. You don't have to put in Northwest or Southwest or Avenue. All right. But if you did want to, you can do it over here. Direction and type. All right. Zip code. And then county. Very important. All right. If you don't choose the county and you choose the wrong county, you're going to wonder why the property's not showing up. We're going to click on find tax data, and there's the listing or the property itself, right? So once you confirm that that is indeed the property, we're going to click on select. From here, you're going to see all the information that's going to be populated. We're going to populate the parcel number, which is the folio number. We're also going to populate the legal description. So everything is going to be populated, including the owner's name. So click on save information to a transaction. And now we have the information inside of our transaction. Before we go any further, you want to put in the list price. Now, if you're going to visit the property for the first time, then perhaps you don't want to put in a list price, right? You want to negotiate a list price with that seller and then write it in when you are at the listing appointment. But if you already spoke to the seller and you already came to a conclusion that you want to sell the property for $2 million, then you're going to put in here $2 million as the list price. Let's click on save data. All right. And we already chose our forms. There they are. All right. It's okay to have all these forms here, guys. These are original forms. But if you wanted to delete forms, let's say I want to delete the short sale the commission agreement, the referral agreement, and the compensation disclosure statement. You want to go ahead and select all of these, and you want to come up here and click on delete, right? You don't need those forms. And while you're at it, you may want to go ahead and include a seller's disclosure. All right. Like I said, we're gonna have our broker add the seller's disclosure to the package. All right. But for now, let's just go ahead and click on add forms package. No, not package, sorry. Add blank forms. And then I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna type in seller. And let's look for the seller's property disclosure residential. And then click on add to a transaction. All right. Ready to go. Let's click on the exclusive right of sale listing agreement, transaction broker. Let's open it up and let's see all the information that was now added to our listing agreement. All right, so the owner's name and then the line number 3 is Elite Ocean View Realty. Notice there's a little parentheses or backslash, / here. Before that, you may want to go ahead and just type in your name. All right, it's in all caps, so I might as well just keep it there in all caps. All right, so Roberto Rodriguez, Elite Ocean View Realty. All right, so that is what's gonna go in line 3. And then we're gonna get this listing tomorrow. All right, so let's go with tomorrow, January 24th. And then we're gonna go ahead and secure this listing for 6 months. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. January 23rd of 2025 is when this listing is set to expire. All right, we have here the address of the property, the legal description of the property, and then any appliances or personal property that also will be sold with this property, you're gonna include it here. Now, when I mean personal property, I'm not talking about the car, right? I mean, maybe they want to go ahead and leave a car behind, but what I mean by this is like, let's say they have an outdoor hot tub, right? It's not a fixture to the property. It's not, underground. It's an outdoor hot tub. That's personal property. And if they wish to also include it in the sale, then personal property, including appliances, you're going to put in here outdoor hot tub. All right, so you can put it in here. Now, right here, occupancy, once again, this property is or is not occupied by a tenant. In this case, it's defaulting to it's not occupied by a tenant. But if it is occupied, you're going to write is, and then when does the lease expire on the right-hand side. All right, right here's the list price. We are accepting cash, conventional, and that's pretty much it. No FHA, no VA. This is a $2 million sale. All right, FHA does not cover $2 million in a purchase price. Any other financing that is accepted, you're going to go ahead and check it out. All right, so we're going to move on down here. Everything is pretty standard. Everything is already checked for you. You don't have to check anything else. Right here, not at the listing, right? Seller to provide a seller's property disclosure. I want to see this capitalized here. Seller property disclosure. So we are letting people know that we are going to provide a seller's property disclosure. So we're letting the seller know that at some point they're going to need to fill one of these out. Okay. Now you'll notice that we have an aggressive 4% compensation. That is totally negotiable, guys. So if you leave 4%, you're letting the seller know that you wish to make 4% on this representation. That's aside from whatever we are going to offer the buyer. So in this case, when you use our package, you are going to see here a 4% compensation to you and a 3% compensation to the buyer agent for a total of 7%. This is when you use our package. So if you don't agree with this, if you want to lower this, please go ahead and lower it. 3%, all right, plus $4.95, the transaction fee. And then down here, for the cooperating broker, letter B, 3% of the purchase price. And you're pretty much done. You'll see here, seller will pay $495 transaction fee at closing to Elite Ocean View Realty. It's exactly the same transaction fee that a buyer would pay us. All right. And for rentals, remember our transaction fee is $95. And right here we have the address of the property, the seller's signatures, and of course, Roberto Rodriguez, Elite Ocean View Realty, our office phone number, our office address, and you are now done with your listing agreement. You click on save. Okay, and now you're ready to have it signed. Very simple, guys. All right, so when you get ready to go to a listing appointment, you want to take one of those listing agreements with you. If anything, take two of them, right? Take two of them. Have two listing agreements ready so you can leave them a copy right away. And then you bring the other copy with you. Any questions on getting a listing agreement filled out inside of Form Simplicity? That was a very quick example. So from here, of course, you're going to go ahead and have it e-signed. If you already spoke to the listing, to the seller, you already visited the property, you came to an agreement that you are going to indeed list the property for $2 million, you're going to select the property and the listing agreement, and you're going to click on e-sign, and you're going to prepare where the seller is going to sign it, and you, as the listing agent, you are going to sign it. All right, we're not gonna go through that because that's part of a form simplicity class. So just wanted to cover these listing agreements. All right, so I think that you guys are understanding that listing agreement. I'm gonna go back to the blank forms real quick here. And I do want to open up the listing agreement for a commercial property. So I'm gonna go ahead and type in here listing once again. All right, and then let's look for the listing agreement for a commercial property. There is a vacant land listing agreement as well. So if you want to list a residential vacant land, then you're going to be selecting the vacant land listing agreement. Right here, we have the exclusive right of sale listing agreement, commercial, right? So let's open that. If your client owns, let's say, a restaurant, or they own a warehouse or an office space or anything that's commercial, then this is the listing agreement that you will fill out, right, for that commercial sale. And again, this contract is between the owner and the brokerage. And when does the listing start? When does it end? Description of the property, street address, the legal description. Any description of personal property, including machinery, inventory, supplies, and equipment upon the following price are going to be here, terms. And the total price of the listing is going to go here in line 23. And any financing terms is going to go here as well. All right. Once again, broker agrees to process the property through the MLS, multiple listing service, to inspect and become familiar with the property and promote its sale, to present all offers and counter offers in a timely manner, regardless of whether the property is subject to a contract for sale or not. So let's stop right there, guys. When you represent a seller, it is your duty, even if you don't think your seller is going to agree to this offer, it is your duty and responsibility and obligation, really, to present every single offer you receive to your seller. All right, so even if this offer comes in at $100,000 below asking price, you still need to present the offer to your seller. Now, if someone's going to offer $100,000 below asking price, they're probably going to communicate that to you first, right? They're probably going to call you, hey, seller, I have a interested buyer, and he's willing to offer $1,900,000, right? In this case, in a multi-million-dollar sale, $1,900,000 may be a very good purchase price, right? But let's say the property is listed for $400,000 and you get an offer for $300,000. That's a large chunk of change. So you are going to probably receive a text message or an email or a conversation with that buyer's agent saying that their buyer is interested in placing an offer for 300,000. You see, they don't want to waste their time, right? They don't want to waste your time. If you just communicate that to your seller, hey, we received a very low offer, 300,000. Are you willing to entertain? They say no, thanks. Not even a counter offer or anything. Then you just communicate back to that buyer agent, hey, we have a no-go. All right. But if they go ahead and present an offer for $380,000, right, and you are selling the property for 400,000, then of course it is your obligation to receive that offer and forward it over to the listing, to the seller. All right, so this is the commercial listing agreement, pretty much very similar. The commercial commission, again, it's negotiable. However, when you're selling a commercial property, it could be, once again, 4%, 5%, or 6%. Usually you want to go ahead and split it in two, where each side, seller agent and buyer agent, is making equally the same amounts. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And the last form we are going to cover is the listing agreement of a commercial property. Listing agreement of a commercial property. I'm going to go here to the right, and I'm going to type in listing, and let's take a look. Exclusive right of lease. It's exclusive right to lease. It's not even in here. We have to type in lease. Sorry. Let's type in lease. There it is. All right, exclusive right to lease, commercial property. Let's go ahead and select that. Once again, I'm just going to go straight to the compensation part because everything else is pretty standard, right? Everything else is pretty standard. Rental rate, dollar amount per square foot. So if you don't know how to calculate that, and you just want to say it's going to be $3,000 a month, then, learn how to calculate that because it's here. So let's say the property is 700 square feet, right? And your client wants 2,100 a month, right? 2,100 a month. So you're going to go ahead and multiply 2,100 a month. So multiply 2,100 a month times 12, right? That's 25,200. 25,200. Now go ahead and divide that by the $700. All right. So that gives you $36 a square foot. When you list it, and when you're listing commercial properties for lease on the MLS, you're mostly going to see dollar per square footage. So this is $36 per square foot. And the yearly lease on that is about $25,000. And of course, when you break it down by month, it's $2,100 a month. Any questions on how to calculate this? Guys, let's take a look. I'm going to go here to the MLS, and I'm going to run a commercial lease. And let's stick to Miami-Dade. Let's go to an office here. Let's go office space. And let's go zip code 33134. All right, let's take a look. See that? $21 a square foot, $39 a square foot, $32 a square foot. So when you open this, okay, they're leasing an office at $31.50 a square foot times 34.34. So again, how do you calculate that? So 31.50 times 34.34, that is $108,171 a year. Divided by 12, your monthly lease in this building, which is a large 3,400 square foot office space, is $9,000 a month. All right. All right, going back to that lease here. So again, we're going to give you another exercise. All right. Rental rate, dollar per square footage. You are attempting to lease a 1,000 square foot property, and your client would like to lease it for 3,000 a month. 3,000 a month. So once again, what do we do? Anyone volunteer? How do I get the dollar per square footage if they want 3,000 a month and their property is 1,000 square feet? Not everyone at the same time. Huh?
You multiply the square feet. Um,
So
you said, how do we find the?
how do we find the dollar per square footage? If your client wants 3,000, see, if your client already knows that they want $30 a square foot, then great. But if your client tells you the other way, like they don't know how to calculate, right? They tell you, hey, I'm looking for 3,000 a month.
Oh, okay, so
So,
it's
so 3,000, right? You start with 3,000, multiply it times what? 12 months,
times the square feet.
right? 12 months, that's $36,000 a year, right? Their property is 1,000 square feet. Okay, so you divide it, 36,000, you divide it by 1,000 square feet, you're looking at $36 a month. I mean, sorry, $36 a square foot. I mean, I kind of made it easy, but you know, you guys now get the idea on how to do it. All right, guys, so this is the listing agreement for a lease, and once again, for a commercial property. And save it, and get your client's signatures, and then go ahead and upload it to the MLS. All right, so that was our class for the exclusive rights listing agreement, right? Exclusive right of listing agreement. That was our course. I did record this session, so you'll be able to rewatch this later on this afternoon inside of our YouTube channel, and you can review it. I do want to mention that we will have another class similar to this, which will cover the FAR bar as is contracts. So the purchase contracts and documents that we normally use in a sales transaction. So look out for that. That's coming soon. All right, guys. So thank you so much for joining us in today's class. I look forward to seeing you guys. By the way, next Friday, January 31st, we will have an in-person training here at our Coral Gables office. So I look forward to seeing you guys here at 10 o'clock next Friday, January 31st. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.